Can you learn to be lucky? Why does New York Times bestselling author Gretchen Rubin endorse today's author guest? How do you deal with the predictable chaos that life will throw at all of us? And why does delusional optimism always seem to become a self-fulfilling prophecy? All of this and more on today's interview with Karla Starr.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrivetime Show.
Now, 3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here.
All right, Thrive Nation, welcome back to another exciting edition of the Thrivetime Show on your radio and podcast download. And Dr. Z, on today's show, we're interviewing Karla Starr, who is the author of the new book, Can You Learn to Be Lucky? Why Some People Seem to Win More Often Than Others.
It can't come anytime too soon. I got a trip to Vegas coming up soon, so I need your information.
Well,
Karla,
okay.
I need your help.
Now, on today's show, she discusses how random events affect people in predictably self-defeating ways, the best way to cope with the world's chaos and constant change, and how we need to focus on improving the one thing in life that we can control, ourselves, and much, much more. Karla, welcome onto the show. How are you, ma'am?
I am doing fabulous. Thank you so much for having me.
Karla, your book has received a lot of praise. On the cover, Chip Heath endorses the book. It's been featured in The Atlantic, the LA Times, CBS News. Gretchen Rubin, a Thrivetime Show guest, has said great things about your book. Could you share with all of our listeners a little bit about your background before writing this book that is loved by so many people?
Of course, I am a white girl from Buffalo, working class. I went to NYU. I studied psychology. I've known that I've wanted to be a writer since I was 8, and that's pretty much all I've done.
So you've always wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, absolutely.
What'd you want to be when you were 7? Do you remember?
Uh-huh.
Was it a big change? Was it like I went from a firefighter to a writer, or was it something, a ballet dancer to a writer? I mean, was there some big event that happened when you were...
I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, and then I thought, you know what? I feel like writing is just a lot more stable.
That's a common thing for 7-year-olds to want to be. I get that. That's you're obviously very precocious, so that's cool.
Now, Karla, for our listeners out there who are going to pick up a copy of your book there, or the ones who are interested in maybe learning more about it, what first inspired you to write this book?
Well, the big thing that inspired me was, about 8-9 years ago, I moved back to the United States after spending a few years in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And I moved back a less than optimal time. It was right around the height of the Great Recession.
Okay.
And things were just, it was tough, obviously it was tough for a lot of people, but it just seemed like I was just having a harder time getting traction, getting things moving. And, about 8 years before then, something happened. I was in a horrible car accident. And so I ended up getting depressed after that. And so it was a car accident. And then a while later, it was me going back, having a hard time finding a job. And I just felt like, you know what? What is going on here? I just felt like the world is so random. These things kept happening to me. And I thought, what is one thing that I could study that could help every area of my life? Because I'd been reading all of these books on success and all these self-help books. I remember at the time I was reading Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell.
Got it.
And The Black Swan by Nicholas Taleb. Right. And so the one says, sometimes you get lucky if you're in the right time at the right place. And the other one said, you know what? The world is random. And I just thought neither of those really told me what to do. I was like, okay, great. So the world is random and sometimes you have to be at the right time at the right place. But where's my go-to? What do I do? So I felt like the book I needed to read didn't exist. So I wrote it.
So you began to deep dive into the research. You really poured over research and really got detailed. And I know you spent a long time preparing to write this book. And in the book, you talk about how random events affect people in predictably self-defeating ways. Can you break down what you mean by this?
Absolutely. So I think one of the main things that I realized was that, or that I learned, was that, we come to understand about ourselves and the world through other people, right? And through just the feedback that we seem to get from the world, or what they say about us, or what we think is possible, or what we think we should do next. And a lot of times, we'll send out 50 resumes and, we won't hear anything back. And maybe it just happened to be that, there was some kind of glitch in the matrix and, a lot of those got erased, or, there's some kind of bug or something. Just, it could be anything. But what's the message that we get? We're bad. We're not worthy. We're doing something wrong, right? So we go apply to Starbucks. And it just seems like, people are so sensitive to the feedback that we get from the world. But a lot of times, if you look at just the neuroscience of how people make decisions, how people decide what's rewarding, how people decide whether or not you should get the job, a lot of times it's about 50% of the variance in social situations, right? So about 50% of how people are evaluating us has absolutely nothing to do with us, right? It's just their baggage. It's just, what their brain happened to have experienced in the past. Are they tired? Are they grumpy? If you're grumpy and you're not going to like anybody who you hire, or you're not going to like anybody who you interview for a job.
I want to get your take on this. Dr. Z, how would you describe how you grew up financially? Did you grow up rich?
I grew up with several silver spoons.
Oh, nice.
In my mouth.
Collector's edition.
Big trust fund. I haven't found the actual fund location.
Somebody stole your spoons too.
But I think it was more. I think the D got left. I think it was just trust fund. That's how I grew up. So no, big family, not a lot of resources, but a lot of love, and a lot of discipline.
Karla, I would say that both Z and I grew up. We'll go with not rich for 5,000 points. And Z, between the three of us, or between the two of us, we've gone on to start 13 multi-million-dollar companies and growing. Z's, you started, you helped to invest in early stages in Regent Bank, the optometry clinic, your auto auction, our haircut chain, a photography chain. We can go on and on listing the companies. And I think that both of us are missing our amygdala, Z, when it comes to rejection. It's like when people reject us, we don't care. Karla, could you please explain to us what is wrong with us? Because most people say, you guys are so weird. Why do you not care when you get rejected? What's wrong with people like us, Karla, that are somewhat numb or really dumb when it comes to rejection?
Maybe a little bit of both, yeah.
Nothing. You're doing it right. I love it. So many people are overly sensitive to these, perceived negative things or, potential for rejection, and they end up overemphasizing all the possible downturns, and they never try. And, the one common thing that you find across all these ideas in psychology, like optimism, grit, resilience, confidence, right? All these things are, you ignore the bad things, right? You learn from the bad things, and then you shove those aside, and then you keep going toward the good things. You just keep going toward the good things. So I think, it sounds like you've probably, done a good job at mitigating risk, right? Like if you want to go into, open up a new business, you're doing it a smart way where it's not like, oh, if this fails, then, you have to go live on the street forever.
Absolutely. So it seems like as a society, we used to be a lot tougher. Our skin used to be tougher. Is it just an epidermis thing? Is our epidermis actually getting thinner, Karla? Do you know, or what's going on with society? Why? When I was a kid, I remember there was this fun statement that said, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me, kind of thing. And now it's like even a bad look.
Just
I've crumbled for the day. It's
and I'm offended.
Gave me skunk eye.
First off, do you even agree with his observation? Do you think people are getting more easy to offend, more easily offended?
Sensitive.
I don't know if they're getting more easy to offend. I think that part of it is, I would like to blame social media. I think that people really underestimate how much work goes on behind the scenes that you don't see, right? It's everyone's highlight reel, right? So we're only posting like the 0.05% of our life that looks good, right? So I think if you try really hard and, it takes you a while to get something, you think that there's something wrong with you. But what you don't realize is that, everybody has to try really, really hard and persist through rejection and failure. And then finally, that one time they get that win, that one time they get that victory, that's what they post, right? No one's posting about like all those boring days of practice.
Carla, I'm going to blindside you with a bunch of scenarios because your book talks about how to deal with the world of endless change and chaos. So I'm going to have you coach me or the listeners out there, but I'm going to use my life as an example, and I'd like to see if you can kind of coach me through how to deal with this, okay? When I started my first company, DJconnection.com, that went on to become the largest wedding DJ service in America at that time, my partner and my roommate died in a car accident. Like right after I started it, it was like he got killed in a car accident, and I felt like that maybe that was a sign that I should not keep going. That was how I initially processed it. What advice would you give for somebody out there who just lost a loved one in a seemingly random accident?
I think that if anything, it should be a wake-up call that life is short, and they would want you to go after your dreams.
That's good for somebody out there. I know there's somebody out there. I know that I needed to hear that when I was 18, 19 going through that. Now, Z, you know this, but when my dad, when we found out my dad had Lou Gehrig's disease, we knew he wasn't dead yet, but we knew things were going to get a lot worse, and they weren't going to get better. They were going to get worse. It was not going to be a good. For somebody out there who's listening and they found out that somebody in their family or there's some terminal illness or something terrible, they've just a medical diagnosis, and again, it's just thrown them off of their optimism. They've read all those self-help books and they were going 90 miles an hour in the right direction, and all of a sudden they're just struggling to cope with the world's chaos. What advice would you have for someone like that?
Well, my grandmother passed away a few months ago, and I remember at the beginning of the summer when her health just kind of suddenly started to decline because she got an infection, and then all of a sudden she couldn't walk. And I remember visiting her, in the summer, and she was in her hospital bed. She, at the time she still had her wits about her, and she just said, "Oh, this is stupid. This is stupid." And it almost seemed like, in a second her life changed, and she kind of knew that this was it. She knew that this was the end. And it just seemed like that she had some regrets about things that she didn't do. So the thing is, we never know exactly when that day is coming, when all of a sudden we might never be able to walk again, and when that comes, what are you going to wish you would have done? I think if you get some kind of notice that things are going downhill, this is your chance, life has given you, a deadline. So make the most of it.
My final question I'd have for you, and Z, you and I have been in different industries, so you know what I'm talking about. A law will change, and all of a sudden it changes everything. Or in the DJ business, Carl, I'm sure you remember Napster. Napster came out in 99. I was building this big old DJ company, and all of a sudden my competitors were downloading their music for free, and I'm buying licensed music, and it's sort of giving them like this unfair advantage. There's talks that it's going to be just free to download music for free forever, and it just threw off the industry. Or Z, I'm sure in the optometry clinic, you've had laws that have changed or competitors that have come in there. Carla, what advice would you give for the listeners out there who are just rocked because of the constant change in their industry? Something in their industry's come in and really disrupted the way things have been for 20 years. What advice would you have for somebody out there?
Well, similar to the way that I said that, one of the reasons that you guys have probably been successful is that you've done a good job of mitigating risk, right? So if this thing changes, you're not going to lose everything. So I think that the way that, if you're starting a company, you have to just accept things will change. Don't put all of your eggs in one basket. If you only have one client, or if your entire, income relies on one little thing, or in the industry never changing, you're not setting yourself up for the inevitable change that will come.
And if you're talking to Blockbuster, you should have bought Netflix. Oh, sorry.
Hey, by the way, Carla, do you have a family
Just saying.
video in your community?
A family video.
Yeah. Do you have one of those? It's like the world's last video store.
Yeah.
It's filled in the niche where Blockbuster left. There's still. Do you have those, Carla?
I do not.
Carla, where do you call home? Do you live where in America do you live?
I live in New York.
Well, if you are ever planning a tourist vacation to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I know you are, you're going to find two family videos. It's unbelievable how they still succeed, but some people are still renting those DVDs. Now, Carla, from your perspective, why do you believe that we need to focus on improving the one thing in life that we can control? Ourselves.
Because I think that, we should direct our energy where it is most useful. It's where you're going to get the best return, right? Investing in yourself.
Karla, in your book, you talk about confidence. So I want to tap into your wisdom here. From your perspective, where do you believe confidence comes from? And why do we have more of it in some situations than others?
Well, confidence, I would generally say, is a positive evaluation of our own actions, right? It's the ultimate, it's the I got this. But where do we think that we got this? That's where it starts getting a little tricky, right? So we learn about whether or not, the cake we made is good or the song we sing is on key or not from other people, right? We can't help but pay attention to what other people say about us or how they're evaluating us. So essentially, we learn how to evaluate ourselves through what other people are doing and what they say about us.
I think
So, yeah.
I think a lot of people, because they don't want feedback from a lot of people, I think a lot of times people make very small social circles. And there's been many books written about this, but your network is your net worth. But you go out there, you try to network, you try to expand the circle. People say you become the average of your 5 closest friends financially, and you go, I'm going to go meet the millionaires, Z. I'm going to go meet the millionaires, Karla. I'm going to go meet the new book agent. I'm going to go get that book deal. And then you get rejected. And then you go, you know what? I'm just going to go on Facebook and look for a picture of a cloud, and I'm going to comment on it, and maybe I'll play a video game online. Because you kind of recoil. So for somebody out there who's struggling to make new social contacts and to maybe expand their territory, their network, what advice would you have for our listeners out there?
So I would say just, little steps one at a time. I think that the best advice that I got for the social situations and just how to expand your network is to, and this sounds silly, but just pretend like everybody you meet is attractive. Why? Because think about attractive people, right? You like them, you want to be their friend, you give them the benefit of the doubt, you learn more about them, but they're a little more interesting. You find out what's cool about them and then you focus on that. And, this sounds silly, but, once you've done that, once you treat everybody like that, it's just amazing at how much nicer people are, surprisingly.
Right.
It's like you treat people well and they're nice, right? If you're helpful, I think this is a really important thing. I think a lot of people, when they think of networking, it's like, oh, what can I get from others? But think about the flip side of that. How would you like it if someone came up to you and said like, oh, so, what do you got for me? Right? It's me, me, me. We're attracted to people based on what kind of rewards we get in their presence, right? Are they nice to us? Are they helpful? So I think it really is just kind of having empathy and being able to put yourself in the other person's perspective and understand, they are also, we're all kind of self-interested, but we're all also very sensitive to whether or not people are givers or takers.
How did you go about expanding your social circle and ultimately landing a book agent? What was your process for getting a book deal? Because there's so many people that want to be an author. How did you go about landing a book deal and landing an agent?
Well, my process was I looked at, say, maybe 5 people whose careers I wanted to emulate, and then I just Google stalked them and I looked at what they were doing. Not today, but what they were doing 5 years ago, what they were doing 10 years ago, right? Who are they writing for? And then I saw that, there's a very specific pattern. Like every one of them had built this ladder. They just kind of progressively written for, more national audiences, longer articles, their website looked nicer and nicer. And I realized, if you just compare yourself to where other people are right now, you're going to get very frustrated and you're going to think it's not worth it. But if you just kind of look at what's the next step I can get, what's the next step I can take to move up, you just keep doing that little by little, it pays off.
So you deconstructed the success of people who were where you wanted to be, and then just broke it down into bite-sized little chunks. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly.
Do you remember one of your first big chunks? One of the first things where you go, whoa, they're doing this and I definitely am not. I need to get on it.
Well, I think one of the first things was I was talking to somebody at a party who had been published in a publication that I really wanted to get into. And she said, you know, it took about, I had to throw them about 10 story ideas before they got one. And that was when a little light bulb went off. And I thought, whoa. So, if they say no to one, that doesn't mean like you're never going to write for this publication ever. It just means that like, oh, they didn't like this one idea, right? So you got to keep pushing. Again, it's that we never see other people's failures. We never see the rejections. So this happens all the time.
Karla, your mindset, I don't know if you would describe yourself as happy-go-lucky, but it appears to me as you have kind of a happy-go-lucky worldview. And in your book, you talk about this a little bit, about having that. Is that a learned behavior for you to have a happy-go-lucky worldview, or have you always had that?
I think for the most part, I've had that. There have been a few times in my life where, something really bad happened and I kind of had to shake myself out of it for a little bit. But absolutely, I think it's definitely learned behavior. And I think a lot of it starts with attention, right? So it's, what are you paying attention to? Are you paying attention to the good things around you, or are you paying attention to the bad things around you? And it sounds really cheesy, but there's so many studies showing how this is true. And there's so many studies showing, this, for example, is why people who are instructed to keep gratitude journals and write down, say, 5 things a day that they're thankful for, this actually has a really lasting impact on people's happiness, because it essentially retrains your brain to focus on the rewards and the good things around you. And that makes you happy.
There's somebody out there that is, we'll call it upset, go non-happy. Go non-lucky. Upset, go non-lucky. There's somebody out there who is, this freaking doesn't work.
I think I know that person.
I swear this does not work.
Swear.
Can you help somebody out there, Karla, who is experiencing the self-fulfilling prophecy of being an unhappy, go unlucky person?
Absolutely. Just keep a gratitude journal. Try just acting as if, right? Just go do something completely different, right? If you think that things are crap and, everyone's kind of, try treating people in the opposite way, right? Try being like really nice and really positive. I started doing that, and then, oh my gosh, people were nice. People were reaching out to me. My social network started getting bigger, and I had no idea how much I was doing to that, how much I was playing a role in that. I had been in the center, still am, of every single experience in my life, right? Every single second of my life. And I think because we do that, you think of the scientific method, right? There's, this experiment, and they change some variable, and then there's a control group where they don't change anything, right? We don't get that. There's no control. So we can't go through our lives and realize how much we're putting into the situation. So I think unless people make a really big change, they might never know.
Karla, switching gears here just a little bit. We'll go up to Alaska. We're going up and to the left. We're going to the northwest here, going from New York here, Z, over here to Alaska.
That's a long flight.
And I want to ask you this question here, Karla. How Sarah Palin happened? How did Sarah Palin happen, according to your book?
Well, she's an attractive woman, right? And like I said before, how do we treat attractive people? We're a little bit nicer to them. We grade them on a curve. And so when that happens, I think good-looking people can kind of go through life with this larger sense of what they're capable of. And that just kind of cascades over time. I mean, people thought like, oh, she's being ridiculous. Why on earth does she think that, she has what it takes to be vice president? But if you think about it from her point of view, it makes perfect sense. Every single thing that she had done in her life, people had been like rooting for her and getting behind her. She was captain of the basketball team in high school. She was runner-up Miss Alaska. She was a newscaster. She's the mayor. Like every single thing she had done, people thought like, yes, you can do this. You got this. So why not?
Something else when you see someone attractive.
Well, right away I think of you, Z.
No, you try to get their digits.
Okay, yeah, sure.
You know what I mean? You try to get the digits. You know, you're like, hey,
What's up?
is that a mocha latte? Because you're looking good.
Orange mocha frappuccino.
So it's orange mocha frappuccino. But I love that though. That is a great line. Treat everybody as if they're the one, right? The golden goose. There was a commercial FedEx did years ago. I loved, and somebody was shipping the golden goose. I mean, something very, 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 very valuable.
Yeah.
You remember this?
No,
you
but
may
that's
not.
good.
And they lost which box it was in. So they stopped the whole plant and they said, listen, this is up from, the boss here. Treat every box as if it has the golden goose in it. Okay, that's it. Have a good night. And so the point was that everybody looked at every box and said, that probably does have the golden goose in it. Treat it very, very carefully. And I love that attitude of treating everybody as if there's something special before you even know them. You know, give them the benefit of the doubt. And that is a very attractive thing and attracts that kind of energy, attracts that kind of person, attracts good vibes, just attracts all that you're talking about. So I think that's a great word for the Thrive Nation out there. So,
Karla, you in your book have so many knowledge bombs here. I want to get into the portion of your book where you're talking about why it's so hard for many people to be flexible.
Yes.
Why is it so hard for many people to be flexible?
Well, you're asking a woman who has only wanted to be a writer since she was 8, right?
Right.
Why? Okay, so when I was 8, I won my 3rd grade science fair for a project I did on the difference between boys' and girls' brains.
bam.
And I was chosen as the class representative for a writing conference.
Bam.
It was the first grade we'd ever had, some representative for this. So I was the class writer. And I won something about, a little psychology project. And here I am a little while later, and that is my job, right?
Right.
Writing about psychology. So what happened was I just got this idea that I'm good at this. This is my thing. This is worth devoting my time and energy and attention to. So over the years, I kind of just kept on doing that, kept on devoting more of my resources toward this thing, right? I got better at writing. Not better at other stuff, but I just developed the sense of this is my path, this is who I am. This is what I was meant to do. But really it's because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. So that's where I put all my time and attention.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it really is just people, people really get committed and they really get attached to their idea of who they are, what they can do, and what they're supposed to do.
And so if there's somebody out there who's, let's say they're late 20s, early 30s, and they're struggling to gain traction with their career. And let's just for the sake of this, because you're an author, and they want to be an author, and they're just struggling to get published or struggling to gather an agent to represent them. What advice would you have for them?
Just show your work to lots of people and just get better. Just get better and better and better. And I used to think, oh, well, you know what? It's not just skill, it's networking, but really it's kind of everything. I have the one chapter in here, Find Your Thing, and it's all about expertise and how, in order to get a gold medal at the Olympics, it's not one thing has to go right, they just happen to get to the finish line a 1/100th of a second before the other person. It's that every single thing has to go right? They have to fall in love with the right sport for their genes when they're, young enough to be able to develop that skill just in time to reach their physiological peak right as the Olympics are going on, right? It's every single thing has to line up. So I think for anything in life, really, it's just kind of maybe have a little compassion, realize that in order to get traction, it's not that one thing has to go right. It's that all those things have to line up.
Chapter 2 of your book is called The Charlie Brewer Principle, how that warm, fuzzy feeling leads to luck. What do you mean by this?
So one of the really cool things that I learned when I was doing all the research was that, our brain, there are all these different networks going on in our brain at the same time, right? There's attention, there's our action, there's what we're thinking, our emotions and what we're feeling. And all of these things kind of interact with each other. So we get this feeling, we don't really know where it's coming from, but we're we get this hunch and we're completely sure that it's right. But really it could just be maybe that guy looks like, a really good friend of yours from elementary school. We don't know. But what do we end up doing? So many times we just kind of end up acting on our hunches as though they're gospel, right? As though that's truth, that's the fact. And then we end up choosing that thing and then boom, we're right. who knows what came first, right? It's the feeling, but we don't really know where that comes from. But then, the more we do something, the more it seems right, right? So like I got this feeling about writing, ooh, and then I just kept doing that. And then, that just seems like the right thing to do.
Karla, you are a person who is your career. For the listeners out there who aren't aware of this, your book again has been endorsed by Chip Heath, who's Made to Stick is a book that I love. He's a best-selling author. Chip Heath loves your book. Gretchen Rubin, best-selling author, loves your book. You've been signed to your book was published by Penguin Portfolio. You're a rising star, and a lot of things are going well for you. And I think a lot of listeners out there go, "Gosh, she is where I want to be." So I like to ask all of our guests this question: how do you typically organize the first 4 hours of your day?
Well, the first thing I do when I wake up is I work out. And I'm a big believer in, physical health just being the base for everything. Because I used to think, oh, that's just a waste of time. But honestly, I have so much more energy when I prioritize my physical health. I just don't understand why I wouldn't do that now. So it's definitely wake up, I hit the gym, and then I come home, then I have breakfast, and then I plan out all of my to-dos for that day. That's what I do.
What time are you waking up?
7:30.
So 7:30 you wake up. And what do you have a healthy breakfast that you eat every day? Do you have kind of a routine for that, or what do you like to eat for breakfast?
Egg whites and avocado toast.
Egg whites and avocado toast. That's your move.
Yep, that's my go-to.
Now, what else? Because you're achieving success, and a lot of people statistically, there's very few people that I think everybody can get to where you are, but very few people do as a percentage of the whole. So I would like to ask you this. I mean, what is something that you do on a daily basis that you feel like allows you to achieve success that most people choose not to do or just don't know to do?
Honestly, I think it's just keep going. I mean, I know so many people who are better writers than I am, who are so much smarter than I am, but they just got sidetracked by other things. Like 10 years ago, they got a really good job offer at this advertising agency, and they just kind of were like, you know what, I'm just going to take the money. And honestly, like if we had traded places and they had come out with the book, their book would be so much better than mine. But I just stuck with it.
Stuck with it.
Yeah, I just kept going. I just kept like going through the rejection and trying to get better and, writing about different things. And I just didn't give up.
Karla, Dr. Z has a tough question for you. And I know Eric Chupp does too. Eric loves to interrogate all of our guests, but I have one more question I'd like to ask you.
Oh, yeah.
Karla Starr, you have a book that's doing well. You're having success as an author. You've been wanting to do this since you were 8 years old. What can we expect to see from you in the next 12 to 18 months? What does that look like?
Oh, very exciting. Well, I'm going to be doing some more speaking and consulting, and I am working on a project with a collaborator. It's going pretty well.
Okay, so it's we cannot mention the specifics, but if we just do a Google search for Karla, Karla Starr, we can kind of follow you, and in the next 18 months, you have a lot of exciting things happening.
Absolutely. I'm going to start a video series on my website that I'm very excited about.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are you amped? Are you pumped up?
I am so pumped up. I just got my lighting fixtures today. So yeah, it's happening.
Okay. Dr. Z, tough question from you, and we have enough time for a tough question from Mr. Eric Chupp. Back to you, sir.
Karla, if you could go back in time and talk to a younger version of yourself, say maybe your 7-year-old self. No, I'm teasing. Be a writer. If you could go back and now that you've lived the life you've lived, if you could go back, say 10, 15, 20 years and sit down with yourself and talk to yourself, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say keep in touch with everybody.
Really? And what does that look like?
Keep in touch. Like, I think I've met so many amazing, interesting people in my life, and then we just kind of like, fall out of touch.
Sure.
And, I think the people who keep in touch is just like, imagine it's like your social circle, as we're saying, like people who want to expand their social circle. Probably the easiest way to do that is to keep in touch with the people you already met.
That's a good word. Yeah.
That is a good word.
To be purposeful in that, because a lot of times we're busy, right? Everybody's busy, and so you can't drop a note, which is easy to do.
Yeah.
An email,
Text.
text. How you doing?
Hey, what's
what's up?
happening?
Yeah, that's a good word. Well, there you go.
It takes so little. It takes so little. Just send that email a couple times a year, and then who knows where they're going to be.
Right.
You
And what door they can open for you, or you
Exactly.
can open for them, which in turn lets them open one for you down the road. So that's a good word.
It's a bunch of door opening.
A
Yeah.
lot of doors being opened. Yeah.
A lot of door. Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
Well, hey, Karla, Eric here. I'm going to one up everybody with a two-part question.
Ooh, two-part.
Oh, in your
Nice.
face,
There we
everyone.
go.
All right.
Butterchuck.
I wanted to ask you, where do you think that ability that you were talking about to keep going, where do you think that came from? Were you born with it? Were you taught that mindset? Is it a combination? Where do you think that came from for you?
I'm just stubborn.
Nice.
Honestly, I mean, I'm stubborn, but I've also been like a little adaptable, right? So when I was in my early 20s, I thought that the way to be a quote unquote writer was to write fiction. So I wrote 2 really bad novels. I tried editing them, and then I thought, you know what? I want to be a writer, but maybe I could write about something else. So I just started writing about other subjects. I actually started out as a music critic, and I started out as a book critic, and then I started writing about technology. And then I, eventually started realizing like, oh, hey, I studied psychology in college. Why don't I write about that thing that I happen to know a lot about?
Nice.
So I think that's been really helpful, right? So it's this kind of like stubbornness and keep going, but also like just kind of finding new ways around, within that and being adaptable.
Very good. So you kind of knew what you wanted, and just no matter what, you're going to keep finding that path that got you there. Now, my second part of the question is, we work with a ton of business owners. We have a lot of business owners and managers that listen to the show. Is there one piece of advice as far as that they can implement with their team? Maybe they could give to their team members to try and help them build up their ability to overcome obstacles and kind of break through walls?
Yeah, I think, you're saying in the beginning, like, oh, Las Vegas, like what's the one key to getting lucky? Honestly, I think the one key to getting lucky, say, is to buy all the lottery tickets, right? Just kind of diversify. And I think that people don't do that a lot. I have no idea why. But the thing is, when you diversify, then you might start getting like a little bit of traction in one area. And so, instead of just kind of overcoming obstacles, just thinking about like, maybe there's a path where there aren't any obstacles. Maybe you should go that way.
Ooh.
But Karla, there's somebody out there who's saying, you know what? I am going to do a Google search right now. I'm on the fence. I might be willing to spend the $20 that I would normally spend on random carbonated beverages.
Yes.
I'm thinking about contemplating with 20 hard-earned dollars of my
U.S., I might add.
U.S. dollars, or about 4,000 Canadian dollars. About 30 Canadian dollars.
Yeah.
Karla, why should everybody? Why do you worked hard on this? You poured your heart into this. Why should everybody pick up a copy of your book? Can you learn to be lucky?
Well, I can honestly say that doing the research for this and writing this, like every single area of my life has improved. Like every single area of my life. And the hilarious thing is, I have actually been referring to the last 2 chapters this year, and it's been helping me. Like
Really?
I'm taking my own advice, and things are going well.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah,
A lot of people don't do that.
yeah.
So the last 2 chapters of your book, that's kind of the tease for the listeners out there. The last 2 chapters, you've been referring to those yourself throughout the year, and it's helped you.
Absolutely. And it's actually really weird because there have been a couple times in the last few months, I've come in at a crossroads, or I've had to make a decision. And then I just kind of flipped through my own book, and it was like, oh, okay, I answered that a couple years ago, and there it is in black and white. So I got to take my own advice. So I did, and it's going well.
Karla, I appreciate you so much for being on the show. Do you have any one last word of wisdom or any encouragement or any advice you want to give for all of our listeners before we wrap up today's interview?
Yeah, life is like Lotto. You got to be in it to win it.
There we go,
Whoa,
Chuck.
quick.
There we go.
Bam.
Bam! She was ready for
Ooh,
it.
she was on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Karla, at the Thrivetime show, we like to end every show with the phrase BOOM, which around here stands for big, overwhelming, optimistic momentum. So are you prepared to bring us a boom from New York?
Oh, yeah.
Chup, are you ready?
I'm ready, man.
Z, are you ready from the other side of the studio?
Absolutely.
And here we go. With any further ado, 3, 2, 1, boom!